I didn't even know this book existed. That's the truth. I wasn't looking for it, but the author, Paul Benko, is a grandmaster that has a big history, is a composer, is the one that was instrumental in letting Bobby Fischer go to play the Interzonal, and then what happened was that it was the most amazing run for the World Championship ever. So when I saw this title, I was a little doubtful, because how do you win with chess psychology, right? It's not true, especially in today's world with the engines. The engines are really vindictive. They don't like psychology at all. You really need to beat them in calculation, which is impossible because they see 20 moves or more every time. But in this book, in chapter 4, Paul Benko presents 2 games against Fischer, and I think you wanna see them. I think you wanna know what is writing, okay? So I will read it for you. So this is chapter 4, Chess as Life. He says, I first met Bobby Fischer when he was 15. The occasion was in the Interzonal tournament at Portorož, Yugoslavia, where Bobby became the youngest grandmaster in history. Since then, we have met frequently at tournaments and on other occasions. We have analyzed chess games and position together and have talked about chess and other subjects. Okay, he doesn't talk about the fact that he slapped Fischer and made him cry, but that's another story, I think. I knew him very well, blah blah blah. At Portorož, however, I was not quite ready to believe he was as good as some people said he was. He clearly had an important career in front of him, but at that moment he was still an unproven 15-year-old boy. Players of that age have a low tolerance for positional pressure and often take unjustified risk to escape from even mildly unpleasant situations. Now, you must understand, this book was written in 1991. I doubt that Paul Benko would say the same things of the present generation of players, because the Praggnanandhaa, the Gukesh, I don't think they fit the bill or the description he says. I think they are really amazing players, but obviously I speak of them, but you can mention any other grandmaster that is 15, 16, 18. They are on a different quality, I think, today, thanks to the fact that the training is totally different. In that time, Fischer didn't have this kind of exposure to all these grandmasters, coaches and so on. He had to read books and make out what he could from those books, okay? So here he says, before our game at Portorož, my first against him, I decided to try for a purely positional game in which he, playing black, would be under some slight pressure, at least at first. We met in the 4th round. In his first 3 games, Bobby had made 2 draws and had beaten Geza Fuster, although he had escaped from a lost position in that game. I wanted to get into the same opening variation, but without tipping my hand. If I played the opening the way Fuster had, Bobby would smell a rat and switch to another variation. I found a way to solve that problem. Okay, and now we go to the game. So Paul Benko is white, Fischer is black. The opening is King's Indian defense. I mention it for those who like, obviously, to know more about the King's Indian, because there is clearly an evolution of the opening through the games of Fischer, Kasparov and other, okay? Petrosian. D4, knight f6. c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, and f3. Here Benkov writes, Bobby played the King's Indian at every opportunity in those days. This move identifies the Samish variation, which Bobby eventually came to regard as the strongest line against the King's Indian. e5. This looks safe enough since white gets not advantage by trading pawns and then queens. Obviously it's saying d takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d8, king takes d8. In some cases you enter an endgame that is favorable for black, or that black wants to enter. Okay? Here it says, but it may be premature since black might find it difficult to free himself with c5 later on. So he thinks that this is premature. Let's see. Knight g e2, castle, bishop g5. And here he put an exclamation point. The game that he mentioned before by Fuster, it was played bishop e3 instead of bishop g5. Now, keep in mind that this is 1958, so not only Benkov saw that move played by another player, but he had to prepare something different, okay? And he didn't have computers. He said here, Fuster had played 7 bishop e3, the next move with its unpleasant pressure on black's knight is more aggressive. Black can break the pin with h6, of course, but after bishop e3, white will win a tempo with queen d2. So practically the idea that he's trying to tell you is that if you play this, you have created a weakness. So I gain a tempo because I want to do this, and then you have to defend. But I wanted to play this in the first place. I didn't really care, no, about here. And this gives me something to attack. So it's perfect. It's really perfect. Okay? Okay, so let's see how Fischer will answer, because of course he will not want to create this weakness, right? Okay, and in fact Fischer played e takes d4, boom. Bothered by my bishop on g5, Bobby releases the central tension. Okay, this is a way in which you don't keep the tension, which allows me to improve the position of my king knight. This is the king knight, because in that time they were using the descriptive notation. So this move would have been king knight, king 2. That's I tell you why he calls it the king knight, okay? Bobby is trying to take advantage of the fact that my bishop is not on e3, protecting d4. It's not a bad idea, but maybe the execution could be improved. And he says, instead of taking on d4, he could have played knight c6, and then follow with d5, knight d4, and this gives a kind of interesting pawn sacrifice. Keep in mind, this book, I tell you another time, I'm sorry, but I just want to be sure you understand, has been printed in 1991, no computers, okay? So obviously they could give a wrong or a kind of line that is refuted by a computer, and we don't know why, because we don't use a computer. That's simple, right? So queen takes d4, and here it says tack, 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 and black to good bishop would seem to give him enough play for the pawn, though the position is hard to judge. So I don't know. I think Fischer would want to have a bishop pair. But yes, a pawn can be a pawn, but this is just the beginning of a game, so I don't know. It depends if it's able to create an attack. Then I don't know if he wants to castle on that side or not. That is also another interesting thing to discover. Unfortunately, I never saw many games on the King's Indian. I tried to play it once. It didn't work out because I don't have the entire grasp of the King's Indian. I must study it more. Okay, let me return back to the position. Okay, more or less this was the position, and here Fischer played e takes d4, releasing the tension, the central tension. Knight takes d4, knight c6, and now he plays knight e2. c2. This move it's interesting and important because you would see it also in the English opening. In the English opening there is this kind of maneuver, knight e2, e3, knight c2, sorry, e3, and then they really control d5. So that's a typical maneuver you must pay attention to. And here in fact he says the knight is added for e3, retreating it even to its present model square is in line with the principle of avoiding pieces exchanges when the opponent has a cramp position. So if he says this, he thinks that white has more space, and that is an advantage, but it's a temporary advantage. Okay, so bishop e6, as you can see there is a fight for d5, bishop e2 clearing the line for the castling, h6, bishop h4, and now we have what Paul Benko describes it as a mistake because he thinks of the age of Fischer. Fischer plays g5, and here it says, the impetuousness of youth. Fischer is so eager to get rid of the unpleasant pin that he seriously weakens his king side. The consequences of this move may not be immediately apparent, but it's the kind of move an experienced player would have avoided. In fairness to Fischer, however, he had an inferior position, and a good active plan was hard to find. Bishop f2, knight e5, knight e3, like we said before, and c6. As you can see, the knight e5 was made to clear the square to put the pawn that takes away two possible outposts. However, every time you move a pawn, you create a weakness. In this case, now d6 is the problem, right? So it's interesting that you see every time you move a pawn, you create a weakness. Here, for example, will be attack, right? And here, this will be attack probably on the d file. That's interesting. Okay, let's see what happens. After c6, he plays castle and queen a5. And here there is a diagram. And it says, black is willing to give up his weak d-pawn, since after queen takes d6, rook f d8, queen a3, queen takes a3, bishop b takes a3, white has an extra pawn, but his queen side is in ruin. Okay, so I don't know if you were able to visualize that. Let me show it to you. Queen takes d6, rook f d8, queen f3, queen takes a3, b takes a3, and the evaluation is obviously that you have created double pawn, isolated this. These are free targets. It's a really bad for white, right? So obviously Benko probably will not fall into that kind of trap, I think, right? So let's see what he says. Black move is not just a simple trap, is threatening rook f d8 followed by d5, okay? So at this point, when Fischer plays queen e5, Benko makes a clear thinking, a clear assessment of his opponent. He says the following thing. It was becoming clear that although my young opponent had a few things to learn about this variation, he understood the game very well and was not to be trifled with. So imagine a seasoned grandmaster like Benko realized that he was playing against someone very, very strong. How does it continue? So think about it, because like he told you, Black wants to play this and then this, right? So that's the goal. If you don't take, he's gonna play it in any case. So what do you do? What do you do here, right? Well, Benko found this move, queen d2, boom. Crossing Black up. I was also beginning to ogle his kingside weaknesses. How did he continue? Rook f d8, rook f d1, and a6. Now Black will try for counterplay with b5 instead of d5. So imagine this is a 15 years old in 1958, how fluid he is. And this is also the thing. In that time they had long time control, right? So as you can see, the chess player could think, could create a different plan, could adapt to the different situation over the chessboard, right? So that's kind of very, very interesting. And now that you know that the black plan is b5, what do you do as white? What do you do to fight the plan? Because you need to ask yourself, why my opponent played this move? Because if you don't ask yourself that, I'm sorry, you're just wasting time over the chessboard. Because you need always to understand why, and then find the countermeasure. In this case, a4, because it's immediately going to fight against b5. So, as you can see, up to now, we have seen a fight for some squares, here, then here. So, do you understand? This is the point. They are fighting for squares over the board, something that you don't really touch or see, right? But it exists. Okay, Fischer continued with queen c7, and white played, boom, a5. Very, very interesting move, I think, right? Expecting black to prepare a break on the queen side, I had kept my rook on a1. So this is explained why he used the rook on f1 to go on d1. So that I could play this move. White now has the possibility of an eventual bishop b6. Okay, so he's thinking of this move, that would be a problem. Very interesting. I like the book. I mean, it's some few games, but very, very detailed explanations. So, and very explanation are nearly move by move. So it's, I mean, for what, I don't know if I paid $3. $3, can you imagine? Okay, he played c5. Black is thinking about counterplay with knight c6, threatening both knight d4 or knight takes a5. Okay, but to create that threat, he abandons the d5 square. And this allows the immediate exploitation of the holes on his king side. So what are the holes? Holes. Okay, he has a lot of holes here. Bobby had made it clear several times that he was ready to accept permanent positional weaknesses in return for active play. So far, however, his play has failed to materialize, and all he has are the weaknesses. So, what do you think White will play right now? Okay? What do you think that White will play right now? He played h4. Boom, attacking, right? Threatening h takes g5, after which knight e d5 would be extremely strong. Extremely strong, yeah? Because knight e d5 opens the diagonals, no? So the attacks start to become real. Now, Bobby must give up any idea of counterplay and concentrate instead on defending himself. He may not have paid much attention to this move, since White normally does not weaken the position of his own king. And in fact, it's true. This is a move that probably Fischer never saw as a possible pattern, as a possible something that comes out in the King's Indian, if he saw many King's Indian game in books, right? So what does Black play now? He plays Queen e7, h take g5, h take g5, knight f5, boom, obliging Black to lose the bishop pair, and look how the attacks start to materialize, right? So bishop takes f5, e takes f5, and g4. Notice, by the way, this pieces, this chess set, it's a replica of the one used for the match between Fischer and Spassky in 1972. Okay, I like, maybe I don't know if that was in ebony, but I like the mahogany wood because it's brown, and I noticed the camera sometimes cannot catch the black. Everything becomes black, and you cannot see the pieces. Brown is generally a little better. So up to the moment I don't get a better camera that is able to distinguish the hues and the different colors better. Unfortunately, this is what we have. Okay, now let's see what happened here, because after g4, what do you think White played? Now you must understand that the psychology in reality of grandmasters is that they don't answer to an attack with a defensive move. They answer to an attack with another attack. And White played this. By the way, the pieces are really heavy, so that's why they are pleasant. Queen f8, removing from the pin, but unfortunately there is this guy still there, right? F takes g4. Of course, if you play bishop takes f6, you win a pawn, but then Black would be able to set up a blockade on the dark squares, counting on the opposite color bishops. So you must be careful when you want to give away your bishop pair. So f takes g4, knight e takes g4, bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, and now tell me what you would have played, okay? What would you have played if you were White? Obviously, you are thinking, let's take on d8, not a good idea. Not a good idea. Why is not a good idea? Because it doesn't take immediately. He plays bishop d4 check, and so it becomes a big problem because this queen is ready to go into action too. So you must be kind of aware of the problem, right? So White, at that point, he played Queen g5. Knight f6. And rook d3. This lift, this rook up lift, it's very important because he wants to go here. And so you see all the white pieces are clearly going toward the king side. Knight h7, queen g4, and here Fischer played f6. Benko comments, says there is no other way to stop white from playing f6, otherwise white would have played that. Even in my usual time pressure, I had no trouble finding good moves in this position, since black hasn't even a whisper of counterplay. And now he gives the next moves, a series of moves that are probably more or less forced. Knight d5, queen f7, rook e1, as you can see is bringing everything in, rook e8, rook d e3, rook e5, bishop g3, rook takes e3, rook takes e3, rook e8, rook e6, very good move, right? You see, here you are learning about the using the outpost. Everybody, first black tried e5, now white tries e6, right? Knight g5, trying to attack and take away the outpost, but oops, this is the weakness that we talked in the beginning. Rook takes d6, rook e4. Again, notice that grandmasters don't react to an attack with a defensive move. They attack again. Rook d8, king h7, bishop f4, and bishop h6. Here it says Asten in the end, but queen h4 would have won soon anyway. So how does white continue here? Can you see it? I think this is a kind of very simple move, and this is why I show you games on the chessboard, because it's here that you must see the stuff. If you don't see the stuff here, then it doesn't really matter, because you will not see it in a tournament game, and the tournament game is not made on a screen, right? So please enjoy the fact that we have this great opportunity thanks to YouTube and thanks to books, chess books, to improve. Rook d7, boom, because if you take, check, okay? So again, as you can see, the grandmaster reacts to an attack with another attack, but king f2. Here it says that king h2 was even simpler, insisting on winning the queen. Here, one move before the time control, the clock was a factor. So why did he play king f2? Because he was in time trouble. Knight e4, king takes e1, queen takes d7, and queen g6, boom. And here Fischer resigned. He says Fischer lost this game because of his impatience, finding himself on unfamiliar ground, a natural consequence of his inexperience, and in a passive, slightly inferior position. He created serious weaknesses in his eagerness for active play. It was a position that required long, patient defense. Most players, especially young ones, dislike defending position like that, but sometimes there is no alternative. Bobby learned from that game as he did from every loss. The next time we played, 2 years later, I again tried something new against his inevitable King's Indian defense, but this time he handled the opening much better. Bobby was still a teenager, however, and he still made mental errors typical of teenagers, though he safely negotiated the opening. His overconfidence blinded him to danger. And here there is another game from Buenos Aires 1960 that I want to show you, and I will show you in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know if you like it.